Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Ogle, and this is the third in a series of election special shows that we've been putting on. We've got a very interesting situation in Watford this year with the current MP. We've got Dorothy Thornhill, the current mayor, standing. We've got strong support for Labour and UKIP thrown in the mix, and also the Green Party. I'm talking to them about who they're going to be nominating for to stand in Watford as well. But today I'm delighted to say I've got Richard Harrington. Come and say hello, Richard.
Hi, Chris. Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm fine. We're sitting a short distance from each other, but actually over the way. I know you want.
I think I can almost hear you if I put my head out of the window anyhow.
It's quite easy to get it together. But anyway, always a pleasure to see you either virtually or actually, Chris.
Thank you very much. Well, today, Richard, this is a series that we're doing. It's about enabling the people in Watford to learn a little bit more about the people that are standing to represent them, and hopefully more people engage in the process, which is always a problem. But hopefully this will bring the people a bit closer together. So I'm going to be asking you really to just share right now, Richard, a little bit about your history and how you got to be MP for Watford, because a lot of people think that people are sort of groomed into politics and everything else, and I know that your journey has been different, but a lot of people won't know how that happened. So can you just share that with us?
It's true what you say, Chris. I mean, if we'd have met, in fact, we may even have done so. Well, where are we now? If we'd have met 8 years ago today, say, I don't know, in the high street or somewhere, and you'd have said to me, you're going to be an MP. I mean, it never, not only was it something I hadn't even like tried and failed, I never even thought about it. But it's funny, you know, things just happen. I came to Watford in 1979 to work for John Lewis for Truins, simply because I was first member of my family to go to university, and I did law, which I didn't really like. But the only thing I knew anything about was retailing, because my dad had a market stall. I worked there from being 10 years old, and so I thought, oh, well, I've seen how little retailing's done, so I've learned how big retailing's done. And I got, purely by chance, I was asked where I wanted to spend my first year. And I was at Truins on the Queen's Road in the old days of 5-day opening, and chaps could go to watch the football after they finished work at 1 o'clock on Saturday. And it was a different world of retailing than it is today. And coincidentally, it's one of those things, my whole family moved down here, because we're from Leeds originally, but with my sister living in Bushy, myself at John Lewis, and then when my younger brother went off to university, my father and mother, my mother's sitting opposite me now, so I can't say anything out of turn, they moved down here as well. So it was a serious coincidence, but that was nothing to do with politics. I was really interested in politics at university, mainly because I didn't like studying law. And it was quite an interesting period because it was before Mrs. Thatcher came to be Prime Minister. But, you know, I tell all the kids at schools in Watford that, and they think it's quite strange, they think you're sort of born a Conservative or born Labour or something. And it used to be, you know, well, you know, my parents always vote Labour, so I vote Labour or whatever. Well, I voted for all three political parties. I was a founder member of the SDP, which was the precursor to the Liberal Democrats. I voted for Tony Blair in 1997. And you might think, well, that's strange, because I found myself as a Conservative Member of Parliament. But actually, I think my views have remained more or less the same, but the parties do tend to move to the left and the right. And I'd lost interest in it, really, in so much that I read up about it and read political biographies and things. But I, by pure chance, met a friend of mine, said in 2001, he said, you're a bit interested in politics, aren't you? He said, my best friend from university has just become elected to be a Member of Parliament. Would you like to meet him? So I said, sure. So we went down to London to had a burger, Ed's Diner on Fulham Road. I've never forgotten. And it was David Cameron. And I met, had a nice evening and everything. And I'd like, you know, I'm not like the man who turned the Beatles down. I didn't think, oh, what a lot of rubbish. But I thought, I didn't think he was going to be Prime Minister or anything. But his kind of centre-right conservatism really appealed to me. And that got me a bit more interested. And I helped in Watford in 2005. My good friend Ali Mirage was our candidate. You might remember, Chris. He came third. It was pretty hopeless. And I just sort of got the bit between my teeth, and I became like people of my era, grumpy old men. 2008, etc., all the expensive stuff came out, and I was the first one to criticise MPs. By that stage, I'd been to Parliament only 3 times in my life. One of them was on a school trip, so I wasn't sort of, like the one who knew the ins and outs or anything. And then they needed a candidate in Watford because the last chap, Ian Oakley, was some trouble with him. He had a bad breakdown and caused a lot of problems for stalking Lib Dems and all sorts of stuff, which I can't make any excuse for, wouldn't try to, but the upshot of which was they needed a candidate. And somebody said to me, well, instead of complaining all the time about MPs and everything, why don't you try and do it yourself? And that's what happened, really. So I'm afraid if I ever, well, I'm not going to become Prime Minister in the Cabinet or anything, but if ever, even if it was an autobiography, it wouldn't be like, My March to Power by Richard Harrington. Like most things in life, a series of coincidences. And I feel as a person from very much sort of, well, not from an educated background or political background or anything like that, I do feel the job is an absolute honour to do. And if anyone's watching and feels that they would want to have a crack at it, I think it's a really good thing to do, whatever your age and whatever your political view.
Excellent. I knew it was a bit of a different trail, so I just thought it might be worth bringing that out. But you've had some. It's an interesting place, Watford, because what happens in Watford very often is reflected in the result of the general election. In fact, I learned that it was since 1974 that's actually been the case. So a lot of eyes are on what's going on in Watford.
I think it's 1945, actually.
Really, as long ago as that?
They say it's the oldest of what they call the bellwether seats, which means whatever part of the MP is from, the government's from.
And it's specific. It's even more of an interesting issue because you've got an elected mayor, of course, which kind of a lot of people were quite confused about. Well, why do we need both of them? Why have we got 2 sets of people? And that's quite confusing in Watford. But of course, Dorothy's standing as the Lib Dem candidate. But there's been a lot of things that you've been quite passionate about in Watford over your tenure in the last 4.5 years or so, and some quite successful things. But there's some stuff going on in Watford right now, and I've talked about this with the others, and I just want to kind of get your views on it, so that people kind of know where you sit. But we've had this. That the allotment issue with Farm Terrace is going back to court for the 3rd time now. It's like these 2 sides never the twain can meet, as it were. But have we got any lessons we can learn from this? Do you think? What's your views on it?
Well, first of all, I must say that I've not seen your interview with Dorothy or anything, so I'm not sort of. I didn't think it'd be right because otherwise it gives an advantage to the person that comes later rather than first of all. But I must say that I support Dorothy's views. I don't know what she said exactly, but the fact is we need that land in order for the health campus. And as far as I'm concerned, clearly the health campus is a major piece of urban redevelopment, and it will help bring Watford into the age which I would like it to be in, which is the 21st century, modern developed housing, job opportunities, and communications. And my bit of it has been limited at the moment to getting the money for the link road for it. But I am very much in favour of it. As far as the allotment holders are concerned, the law is very clear under the Allotments Act. It's up to the local authority to provide them with good quality, comparable accommodation within a reasonable distance. And I understand this has been done. But unfortunately, it doesn't help the people with the allotments, the few of them there. But the fact is, for something of such magnitude, that there's so many public benefits to the people of Watford, we cannot allow a few people, however noble they might be and however decent they can be, to override what will be a huge regeneration system. So I feel but I think the council have given them more than they had to do by law. As far as these challenges in the courts are concerned, yep, that's part of democracy. It's actually amazing that at such huge public cost, which is what it is, all these judicial reviews cost the taxpayer hundreds of thousands of pounds, that the legal technicalities brought about by the legal industry, the barristers and such like that specialise in this sort of thing, eventually I'm certain that the council will get its way because it deserves to, and the council's there to benefit the majority of people. And unfortunately, nearly every planning application of any scale, there's always a small number of people that it doesn't suit. And I personally feel sorry for them, but at the end of the day, we want to make Watford. Dorothy does as well. There's no difference between us on this. I mean, when we talk about differences between us, it's who's going to be in Downing Street. It's not whether she should have done differently for this or the project or that. And I would hope she'd say the same about me. But the fact is, we need that health campus. We need it a lot for housing. We need it for jobs. And in my view, the most important thing, it's the gateway to the new hospital. Okay.
I want to bring your attention to another issue now, and I did see you down the market about 3 weeks ago, I think it was, having breakfast at Elle's Kitchen. But there's a real challenge right now with the market. It's the move up the road has caused, I think, greater concern and actually a change in the nature of the market, more than I think was ever anticipated. Half the people that probably used to go to the market can no longer easily get there because they are of an elder generation, and they used to kind of drop off the bus and fall into the market pretty much, but now obviously it's up the road a couple of 100 metres. There needs to be some kind of it was better yesterday. I was down there yesterday on Valentine's Day. There's quite a lot of effort gone into
I saw the balloons. I was like, yeah, I saw all the balloons and everything, but I had surgeries and stuff all day yesterday. I didn't pop in, but I usually am in during the week.
Yeah, but it's a real challenge because the footfall is significantly down. I mean, more than 2/3, I would suggest, and it really needs a little bit of thinking, I believe, to kind of get the right kind of stall holders in there and perhaps make it more of a destination than it is, which is just a translated market up the road a little bit. What's your views on the market?
Chris, it's easy to criticise, and I could easily, just because the council's a different complexion to me politically, I could criticise them for it. But you know, I don't understand how anything that is so aesthetically displeasing, that does not have proper signage, that does not have anything that's warm and welcoming to people, that in modern retailing, I don't know how anyone could do it that way. I mean, who's designed this? I cannot, because, you know, I'm a market fanatic. I was brought up on the markets, you know, and I mean markets, not like the more sort of luxury version today. I want those guys to succeed, but there's nothing to bring people in. So if you're having tarmac, for example, these days, have nice coloured tarmac. That thing at the top with where Elle's is, I mean, how could anyone think that could ever succeed as a commercial food court entity? So I've heard the whole thing cost £2 million. I think it is absolutely on the road to oblivion. And I feel desperately sorry for those stallholders. They're hard-working guys. And having a few celebrities there for opening ceremonies and all that stuff, this doesn't make any difference. Rather use the money to leaflet and everything, so that people know where it is. But you can't have a retail venue in today's world that people just walking past literally 5 metres away can't even, unless you put your eyes to the left, you don't even know the market's there. So I would hope that the council would have employed somebody with a bit more commercial nous than this. And I don't know who it was. I know the stallholders tell me it cost £2 million. Well, that's £2 million of our money. You know, it's taxpayers' money, I presume. I mean, it's not going to come from anywhere else. We need a market, and if it means it's going to cost an extra few £100,000 to make it more pleasant and give it some longevity, then I think that should be spent. But at the moment, it is a hiding to nothing because there's nothing to attract people in.
Yeah, I must admit I do share your view, and I think we do need to there needs to have some kind of serious discussions about what to do in terms of stall holder types and how to increase the footfall. But you're right, it's got to be a destination, and at the moment it's not, and that's why it's suffering. So yeah,
when I did the market, if I may just finish the market, when I was brought up, the people that came to the markets came because they couldn't afford to buy in the high street. It was very simple. If you couldn't afford to buy your jeans in the high street, you would come and buy one that was nearly as good, but not quite as good, but for half the price you'd come to my dad's store or any of the others. Same for your fish and meat. Now, today, the high street's matured a lot. You've got places like Primark, talking, for example, about clothing, who can undercut anybody because they're buying I don't know, hundreds of thousands or whatever pairs of jeans at, you know, 50p margin. So therefore, given that retailing now is a general service industry, it's about comfort and lifestyle, the markets have to reflect that. And other markets in other parts of the country have made that adaptation. So I accept Charter Place Market wasn't suitable for that. It was like an old-fashioned market hall. But to start from scratch and do something like this, I just don't know the thinking that went into it. And it's not really my direct business because it's the council. But it's just not commercial.
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. I'm gonna bring you on to one of your pet subjects, which is Watford Junction and the road system around there. What's happening down there?
I better take a swig of my tea at the moment for that. No, it's the bane of my life, Chris. I could go on in a number of ways, but I'll just summarise it. First of all, right at the beginning, these works to reorganise the access, the parking, the one-way system and everything were doomed from the beginning. Everybody's blamed everybody else. Hertfordshire Council blames Watford Council. Watford Council blames Network Rail, etc. So my job has been to try and bring them together. And I must say, Network Rail recently, some of the ideas that we've put up, for example, having a crossing where the taxis go to make it safer, etc., etc., they're slowly coming into force. But even so, the drop-off zone is ridiculous. You either become like a criminal, dropping people off on a double line, or you spend what in rush hour can be up to 10 minutes going around just to drop somebody off. Who could have thought of that? Again, using money that's taxpayers' money. But putting that to one side, because the best we can do in the short term is just improving the little bits one by one, which are being done. The disabled access, the access from the back as people walk through under the tunnel. I mean, rather than going on and on about that, there's a number of things like that. More importantly, secondly, it's using it for the communications for Watford for the future. Given that we've got the Croxley rail link coming, which will link up the Met line to there, and I'm lobbying very hard in the highest echelons of government to get Crossrail linked up to there via the Old Oak Common connection. The station itself is absolutely, totally not fit for purpose, particularly with the extra volume. So it's my job, and it's a big job, this. It's one of the reasons why up to now I've not progressed my political career in any way, and I resigned from my select committee membership to concentrate on this project. It's getting Watford Junction to the top of Network Rail's redeveloped station list in the next round of infrastructure expenditure and the Department for Transport. And because that whole thing with the land at the back, which all belongs to HSBC's pension fund, but should be part of redevelopment, this could be an absolutely fantastic station with all these people feeding into it and everything like that. But it's going to need a lot of will. And for me, for my future, well, not my future, but for Watford's future, this has got to be done, because otherwise it's holding the development of the town back, and it's something I'm afraid that has to be done in the corridors of government.
Yeah, I mean, there's another interesting thing that I picked up on your Facebook page, actually, which relates to roads, and that's what's happened at the Dome Roundabout. Now, have those lights been taken away permanently, or are they a temporary removal? What's happened there?
Apparently, they were taken away entirely temporarily because of the construction of the cycle lanes. But absurdly, everything runs much better. I mean, if ever there was an example of what's the expression? It's not even, it's just taking away government or local government or council or whatever it is interference, you know, these traffic experts. Because it's just common sense, it runs freely. So I just ask people what their opinions were, because obviously it's my job now for lobby. I think this should be permanent. And anybody watching this should please contact me either way. But at the moment, I mean, I just drive there this morning, I can't see why you'd put them back. Is that your experience? I mean, this is not an ex-traffic expert's view, it's just a person that goes along there's view.
Yeah, I mean, I've lived in Watford all my life, as you know, and I used to live in Woodside, Leavesden, so I used to catch the bus down St Albans Road to Watford Grammar School, and it used to be, I mean, it's always been fraught with traffic issues, that roundabout, but none worse than when putting the lights in. And
Yeah.
And I think it runs smoothly. Whenever there's a torrential rain and those lights go down, it seems that the road seems to work better without them.
So I don't know, maybe there's safety arguments and things. I've not yet seen them. But just from a common sense point of view, Chris, I cannot see any reason to put them back. But again, there might be creating accident hazards and things that we don't know about. And obviously, the highways people, they have to take these things into consideration. They can't just knee-jerk, I understand that. But I've heard no compelling argument to the contrary. And I'd be very interested if anyone to contact me that had. And just by email, it's on my website, my email address. I'm really pleased to hear people's views.
Yeah, I mean, the decision to put them in, the road system was different at that point. I don't even know whether Stevenson Way was there when the decision to put the traffic lights on that roundabout would taken place. But clearly, the road systems have changed in the interim, and maybe the requirement to have them there is less than it was before. But interestingly enough, the Dome roundabout, it's called the Dome because there used to be, when I was a child, a car showroom on that roundabout where the Shell garage is that used to house cars in a dome.
Really? And that's why it was called the Dome roundabout. So when would that have gone? I mean,
when I was 11, I think, or 10, it might have been removed. I don't know, something like that.
When Disraeli would have been Prime Minister.
That's a bit about the roads. I think there's some interesting things there, but what we're going to come on to now are some of the more national issues and kind of how you see things from a national perspective. There's obviously the NHS is always one of those hot potatoes. You know, it's the darling of the population, really. But what's your views on your party's sort of policies with regard to the future of the NHS?
Well, parochial. Let's just, as far as Watford's concerned, I'm absolutely delighted that we've had more than our fair share of what's going. You know, we're one of the first places in the country to have the 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, 7 days a week GP surgeries. I fought for that. It's called Prime Minister's Challenge Fund. Thanks to actually a very nice Dr. Mark Semler, he championed it. We got the money. So the GP side's good. The hospital, there's tons of work to do. But at least I can say, you know, I've opened 2 new wards there, the natural birthing things. I mean, things are moving. But on to the sort of national things, which are, I suppose, we should not just be parochial. The problem that we've all seen with A&E in Watford is actually symptomatic. What's happened nationally, up to 40% more people than they were a few years ago taken into A&E now. And I spent hours and hours there, because these are not people with just a sore finger that we should say shouldn't be at A&E. A lot of them are elderly people, a lot of them are seriously ill. And it is a problem that now, as a country, we're spending, and believe me, it's all, most parties when you speak to them think exactly the same. All this rubbish and leaflet, Conservatives are going to shut the, reduce spending in hospitals, and Labour are going to do that, etc. It's all because no one really knows how the country is going to deal with a huge increase because of the age group, a huge increase in burdens on the NHS. And I don't think anyone has got the answers. Our plan as a party has been to give more power to the GPs. As you know, the commissioning group in Watford, one commissioning group, they have a lot more say than they did before, which has cut down on a lot of the management. But the truth is that Watford Hospital is totally at capacity. Most hospitals in the country are at capacity. Waiting lists are longer because the burdens are much more. Now, I do not think the answer, and nor does my party, is privatising the NHS. I do not think that's the answer. I think that's ducking out of what is a real management issue. And there's been a lot of scare stories, I don't know if anyone's read them, in leaflets that I want to, not I, but the Conservative Party want to privatise the NHS, which actually was started under the Blair government. And whilst I think probably there's some ancillary services that probably might be more efficient in the private sector, the fact is we're committed to a long-term free at entry, and so in other words it's free to use, National Health Service. But they've got to find a way of equating supply and demand. I suspect it's not just spending more and more money. because we spend now. I've not got the figures in front of me, but from the last time I looked, I think it was about 130 billion on the NHS in total, out of total tax income of about, and don't hold me back to this figure because I've not looked for years, so I think of about 500 or 550 billion. It's a big chunk, and I don't think many parties, anyone could realistically argue we could double it, but we could double it, and there still would not be enough supply for what people want, and it's the same throughout the whole of the Western world. So, just in summary, I see whatever it takes a commitment to the NHS. I do not want an American system where people depending on insurance and paying for it and everything like that. But there has to be some way of making it more relevant to what the modern world is. One way, for example, must be, at the moment, a lot of beds are in use at Watford General for people who shouldn't be there because they need to move out, either back home or to intermediary care. That system needs completely overhauling. And certainly I see a situation, and frankly, I don't, if it's party policy or not, I don't know, but I'm just telling you what I've seen as an observer, that adult care services and the NHS bit should be one organisation. I think this is blocking up a lot of beds at the back. I think there's a lot of things that are now being used at A&E where people will get into the habit of going to GP surgery because there's all these thousands of extra appointments at GP surgery. I see a lot of things going on to the bigger scales that the government's got to invest in preventative stuff, education about obesity, smoking, etc. I see that's got to be much bigger. We can't have a situation where people just become affected from the NHS's point of view and from their own personal quality of life. They just plough into a situation where they are costing more and more, and it's not, given the fact that the whole health service to improve people's quality of life, it's not doing that either. And actually, I think there's less dispute between the parties than people think. It's just at elections it all comes out. I mean, I remember saying to Claire Ward, who's a perfectly nice person, in fact, I used to tease about it. I'd say, oh, Claire, I see I'm actually shutting the hospital now and in fact closing all the old people's homes. I mean, it's rubbish at elections, but NHS management actually is a lot harder to do. I'd like to see it depoliticised, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy problem to sort out, yeah, actually helping people to take more responsibility for their health and not get ill so often might be part of the solution.
Well, some of it's responsibility, isn't it? I mean, I've done A&E shifts in Watford General on Saturday nights, where without exaggerating, 80% of people brought in, it's self-inflicted in terms of drink. Possibly drugs and things, I don't know, I didn't see much of that, but certainly it was predominantly alcohol related. Well, that is self-inflicted. So when people are coming in with, like, a kid with an appendicitis, a real emergency, was not a bed available because it was clogged up with people who were actually underage who they couldn't let go because it their stomachs pumped from drinking. Well, someone's got to take responsibility for this.
Yeah, definitely. I want to move on to TTIP. This is an issue that I've heard in the community while I've been going about. People are a little bit concerned about the potential for a non-democratic process having quite an influence over products and services that we might be consuming in the UK. Certainly, with the standards being a lot lower in the US than they are here.
Chris, you must mix in different circles to me, because I've not been into a club in Watford where people come up to me and say, oh, Richard, I'm really upset about TTIP, I promise you. But anyway, putting that to one side, I'll just explain for people who aren't familiar with it. It's basically a free trade agreement between between Europe and the United States. And I'm sure everybody would be in favour of that, just putting everything else to one side. But we obviously want free trade agreement anyway, I think. I mean, I think it's logical now. It's the way things have gone. There's been a lot of scare stories, particularly actually to do with the NHS and public health, isn't it, Chris? I think that's what you're referring to. That they will say that making American companies could come in and basically pick what contracts they want to do with public health and NHS and things like that. They might not have the same standards as us, or they might just cherry pick bits, without doing the bits that nobody wants to do. Which is all a myth, because If anyone reads the detail of it, they will see that public services are in fact exempt from TTIP. This is one of these political myths. And having been contacted actually by a few people, I looked into it in some detail, and I did find out, which of course is not like the people that are trying to cause trouble about making people fear stuff about TTIP, that's not even mentioned. So personally, I'm quite satisfied with it, and I think I've got a very good electronic handout. If anybody wants to contact me, I'm very pleased with that.
Okay, all right, that's great, Richard. I'm sure that you know, if people are interested in it, because
you fancy a bacon sandwich this week in the market, and I bet you any money you like, no one is going to come to us and say, "I'm really worried about TTIP."
I'm only just telling you what I've heard. I've talked to people, and they are concerned about some of the things relating to it, especially
a lot of scare stories have been put about. That's very true. But I think, you know, as I say, I've got a good explanation for it. I've not even heard of TTIP until it came out. It was a very specialist kind of negotiation. But the powers that be, I think, again, it's one of these things that's being exploited for election purposes, but the reality is somewhat different.
The last thing I want to touch on just before we close here is on immigration. Obviously, that's always a massive topic when it comes around to the general election. But you know, Watford is a town that has always embraced new people coming into the town. And I think we should all be quite proud of that. So, but you know, it is a hot potato right now. Freedom of movement across the EU and the whole EU debate. What's your views on that?
Well, I think it's quite easy to miss. Actually, there's two arguments that are easy to mix up. One is what's called a sort of benefit cheat argument. That is, people are coming here not to work, to take benefits, etc. And the other is people who are coming here to fill jobs, which otherwise would find it very difficult to fill. So on the first one, which is actually the legitimate argument, which, in my view, which is the benefits argument, there is very little evidence in my dealings with Watford Job Centre. There's many people who were not born in this country on job seekers allowance. I've not seen it, but I do believe that it's the responsibility of government, and that's David Cameron government or anybody else's government, to make sure that does not happen. And for me, this is an absolute red line as far as any renegotiations with the EU prior to our referendum, which hopefully will be taking place the year after next. This has to be dealt with once and for all. And I'm not talking about for 3 months or 6 months. I think we have to have a system where people, if they pay into it for a number of years, they should be entitled to take out of it, but not otherwise. But the second point, which is, let's call it the old-fashioned "they're taking our jobs" argument, which has been coming up from, well, since the 19th century, since Jewish people came into this country in the 1880s, 1890s. It's been all the way through with people from the Caribbean, you know, in the 60s when we were younger, and all the way through now to East Europeans. Well, the fact is, in Watford, we're now down to about 1,000 people on job seekers allowance. Half of those people are people who are naturally in the course of changing their jobs and rotating around. And the fact is, most of the job vacancies that are filled by people from abroad are jobs that need filling and that we cannot fill. We do not have thousands of people lounging around on benefits in Watford who could work. There are some, and with the sanctions and the different ways of helping them getting back into work, they slowly are. But the fact is, a lot of the jobs that are here need to be filled. There's vacancies everywhere. When Morrison's opened with 450 vacancies, there were still 50 that weren't filled as it opened. So we're faced with a situation of actual labour shortages. So I'm not concerned, as long as people come to a job and that job can't legitimately be filled by an able-bodied person, a British person, I'm less worried. But the third thing, where I think there is legitimacy in the immigration argument, having explained the first two, the third thing is that governments, and by the way, this is Conservative, Labour, Liberal, any government, have allowed large immigration to take place irresponsibly, in so much that there was nothing done with the infrastructure, that is, school places, GP places, roads, transport links to adjust with the increasing population. And that's clearly the responsibility of government. It's got to take place. Otherwise, you can't have people living in a town if there aren't enough school places, for example, or GP places. And to me, that's where I think I am, if you like, a big government person. I think it's government's responsibility to plan for that sort of thing. And it's not happened. And I think that's absolutely unacceptable.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think on that final subject, really, we can sort of draw this this interview to a close, Richard. But thanks ever so much for sparing some time on a Sunday afternoon to.
It's a real pleasure. My mum's fallen asleep, so I can't be that interested. No, she hasn't. She said.
Okay. Well, it's been good fun.
Catch you in the market.
Say that again.
I'll catch you in the market maybe this week.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Do get down there. They often say down there that they don't get enough visits from.
Well, I drive them next week. She's responsible for at least £6 of my weight gain. So I'm not. See ya.
Okay, take care now, Richard.
What's this second then?